So welcome everybody. We thank you so much for being here and choosing the SFPL Virtual Library to spend some time with us tonight. We know there's lots of options out there, and do know we miss you and we love you, and someday again we'll be able to see you in person and have this event in person. So we're looking forward to that. We want to welcome you here to the unceded land of the Ohlone tribal people and acknowledge the many Ramaytush Ohlone tribal groups and families as the rightful stewards on the lands on which we live and reside here in the Bay Area. SFPL is committed to hosting many events like this one. And this is Native American Heritage Month, but we're committed to promoting indigenous culture and land rights and learning more about that all through the year. The document that I shared has information on all of those topics, reading lists, resource lists, as well as a couple great websites. We also want to acknowledge that SFPL is not a neutral institution and that we stand in solidarity with Black Lives Matter. And that as an institution, we are also working on our own systemic racism and working towards equity in our own house and in our own city and in our own state, and making us all better people. And as a library, we're committed to doing this and helping this and providing our community with useful and factual information. That's what we do. And that document there also has lots of information about Black Lives Matter, not just Black lives and racism and anti-racism and incarceration, but also Black art, Black love, Black joy. So please take a look at those resources, and the library has all sorts of wonderful things for you to find out about and grow. So super excited tonight to be able to host the poets from Red Indian Road West. And we are going to start by introducing Lucille Lang Day, who is the co-editor of Red Indian Road West. Lucille Lang Day has published 4 poetry chapbooks and 7 full-length poetry collections, including Birds of San Pancho and Other Poems of Place, and Becoming an Ancestor. She is also the author of 2 children's books and a memoir. Her books have received the Joseph Henry Jackson Award, the Blue Light Poetry Prize, and Penn Oakland Josephine Miles Literary Award. Her poems, short stories, and essays, which have appeared widely in literary magazines and anthologies, have received 10 Pushcart Awards. So, I want to make just a couple other library announcements and Zoom kind of housekeeping. For the best view for Zoom, at the top right of your screen should say speaker view, and that will allow you to see just the speaker. We also want to acknowledge that Chanel Miller has been chosen as our 16th One City, One Book. Please check that out today. It's an important book. It's a heavy book, so you might take some time getting into it. And Chanel will be at the library's virtual library in March. So please take a look at that. We have other Native American Heritage Month events coming up surrounding Alcatraz particularly. Coming up on the 21st, Shaping a New Generation of Native American Activists. And I'm really looking forward to this partnership with Alcatraz. And yeah, come. And I cannot not mention this, Angela Davis in the house, Wednesday. Please sign up. It'll also be on our YouTube Live, as is this event on our YouTube Live, for you all to go back and view. Lots of great things on there. And here is the event that's happening on the 21st with Alcatraz. So with that, I would like to introduce and bring up Lucille Lang Day. And I will stop sharing my screen.
I thank you in the Wampanoag language. So Kuda Kudish, Anissa, and the library for hosting this reading tonight. Kuda Pudish to all of you in the audience who have joined us. And also Kuda Pudish to the Ohlones, who were the original stewards of this land. I'm the publisher and the co-editor of this anthology, Red Indian Road West, Native American Poetry from California. And I want to point out there's a beautiful beaded California green sturgeon on the cover. And this was beaded by Kim Shuck, who is the Poet Laureate of San Francisco, and she's also a contributor to the anthology. Tonight, I'll be reading with my co-editor, Kurt Schweigman, and 4 of our anthology contributors. And in addition to celebrating Native American Heritage Month, we're honoring the 50th anniversary of the American Indian occupation of Alcatraz. And after the reading, there will be time for questions and comments from the audience. To start out, my co-editor Kurt will tell you a bit about the history of our anthology and also a little about the Indian occupation of Alcatraz. Kurt has published and performed as Lukewarm Water in the past. His poetry appears in Shedding Skins for Sioux Poets that was published by Michigan University Press. He was a featured poet at the prestigious Geraldine R. Dodge 12th Biennial Poetry Festival in 2008. And he was the first spoken word poet to receive an Archibald Bush Foundation Individual Artist Fellowship in Literature. He's retired from competition now, but he has won poetry slams from California to Germany. And he's currently writing his first novel, which is based on his prose poem, Sitting Bull in Paris. Kurt is Oglala and Sikanju Lakota, and he's an enrolled member of the Oglala Lakota Tribe. So welcome, Kurt.
Thank you, Lucille. It's an honor to be here and with my fellow contributors to the anthology. And, you know, I also want to thank those participants that have joined us here live. And it's really exciting. We're in obviously different times. So normally we would be at a reading at the San Francisco Library, I would think, but now we're here virtual, and that's going to be the way of the world for hopefully not too much longer. But thank you for those introductions, Lucille. I also wanted to just kind of echo that, you know, part of this book in the cover. I'll just hold it up again so you can see. So you can see this sturgeon. That's actual a beadwork that Kim Shuck did of a California sturgeon. So she was kind enough to let us borrow that for the cover, and we really wanted to capture that as a California specific and in a statewide representation. And unfortunately, Kim could not join us. As you may or may not know, she is the Poet Laureate of San Francisco. So she's a rock star now. So she had a conflicting scheduling engagement. So we wish her the best and congratulating her on that high achievement. And I always teased her. I knew all along once she was up for nomination, I told her, "So don't worry about it, you'll get it. Don't worry about it." So, and she did. So it's really exciting to have someone with Native background and tribal affiliation to be in such a prestigious role. So we're very happy for her and her achievement. So, you know, what I can say about the anthology before I kind of give some history around it is, I really feel that, you know, being in the kind of semi-quasi publishing part of poetry world, I started out in spoken word, but, you know, 20 years ago, you know, it was a lot different. There was no social media. There was no kind of really, email was coming about, and that was kind of the latest technology. There was no text. There was no, you know, things like that. So for us, the contributors that are part of this anthology, Red Indian Road West, is that, you know, we really wanted to find those folks around the state that are Native, that are indigenous to this state, but like myself and like Lucy, our ancestry and our tribes are out of state, right? So we're not maybe regarded as, making it into those publications that are national kind of journals, and even those that are specific to the Native American and tribal communities in a kind of a national level. So it really gives a voice and opportunity to those that contributed, and many of them have not been published anywhere else. So it was really important for Lucille and I to really bring those folks along and give them an opportunity to have their work published. And so I wanted to say that about the anthology, and recognizing that really giving the history around this anthology was in, I believe, 2014. I invited Lucille along with some other Native and activist poets. Stephen was part of that as well. So we gave a reading in North Beach in San Francisco at a gallery around the awareness around the incarcerated activist Leonard Peltier, who's been incarcerated, unfortunately, since 1976, incarcerated unjustly. So early in my career and kind of throughout, I've always tried to bring attention to that through my poetry, no matter where I lived, wherever my hometown was, wherever I could do readings around the country and even in Europe. It was important for me to bring that message to people that may not already know. So after that reading, Lucille reached out to me, and she said that she had a dream that her and I were reading from an anthology of Native poets that were local to here. And being a Lakota, dreams can be a powerful medicine. So it was really an easy response for me then to respond, we should do it then. So here we are with the anthology that's been out for a little while now. But I think that these things kind of start by chance and by even in dreams, as I gave that example. So with that said, I really give a lot of kudos to Lucille, because she has been really the one that has been doing the more of the carrying and the work and the all of that involved, and I'm just kind of hitching my wagon to it. So I really give kudos to Wopalatonka. Great thanks to Lucille for really putting forth more of that effort. But it's an honor for me to be a co-editor. And with that said, before I begin my poetry for the anthology, we've had, unfortunately, we lost James Luna. And those that do not know who he was for many decades a really unique artist that lived in Southern California and rural San Diego. And we became friends over the last maybe about 3 years of his life. And it was really, I could say so many things about James that just make me smile, because we really rode this same wavelength of, he was not necessarily a poet. He was a performance artist in that realm. But we became fast friends, and it was really, reaching out to him, being that he is an indigenous person to California, that and of his notoriety, that he would do the introduction. And so I was very honored by that. And I miss him. I think about him. He had such a great sense of humor, but at the same time, he was the most grounded person, either in artist world or professionally, that I ever knew. And even though his performances are quite out there, he was quite grounded, and just the love for similar tastes in music. And lastly, what I'll share is that he trusted me enough to help him edit 2 of his shows in the kind of the biography leading up to what he wanted to perform, and kind of being on that same wavelength of being a Native person, what it means to be a contemporary Native artist in America. I understood his messaging, and so I was very honored that he let me help him edit and kind of write and convey that meaning for an art show in Vancouver, Canada, and British Columbia, and also another show in Fresno. I would send him poems for him or lyrics, and I just I think of when he passed in New Orleans, I wrote him a country and Western song, kind of an old style. And he said he's working on it with his guitar and he really liked it. And he said he's spending a couple weeks to see a friend in New Orleans and that he would call me and, he wanted to talk about it, and cause he really wanted to put it to the lyrics to work. And unfortunately I got news from a mutual friend that he had passed. And so with that said, I don't want to take a lot of time on that, but I just really appreciate all the contributors and everyone that was able to, put their efforts and their good work into this anthology. So speaking on Alcatraz, I don't know if you're aware of this book, but it's called Like a Hurricane, Paul Chatt-Smith, and also Robert Allen Boyer. And if you get a chance to check out this book, and it really, really covers some great history behind what happened with Alcatraz. And, the occupation started in November of 1969 with 78 Native people that went to the island to take, to occupy it. And since I live in Pomo country in Sonoma County, I wanted to share that, that one of the real early on spokesperson who became one of the, important leaders of that occupation of Alcatraz was Richard Oakes. And it was really great to see his family here and see them at events and his grandchildren, his great grandchildren, and even having them at an event here locally the two boy and girl great grandchildren, singing this Lakota honoring song. I was very moved by that. And their mother conveyed to me, how much, and their family, Richard is really looked at as that person to really instill those cultural aspects of their background of Pomo and Lakota. And so with that said, what can be said? I mean, I see that as I hope that never leaves our history of our America, 50, 100, 200 years from now, that should always be in our history books as that kind of, that movement of occupying and sending a message for Alcatraz, and not just for California, but the nation, all the tribes, of all of many tribes that were, took part in that and gave voice to us as indigenous people. So with that, I'm going to begin with a poem on Alcatraz, Alcatraz Thanksgiving. Part 1. My first year living in the San Francisco Bay, knowing nobody, I ate my Thanksgiving meal with homeless, so I didn't have to feel so alone. Then made my way through the Tenderloin, where a street was blocked off for the great Christian food giveaway, asking myself, where in the hell are all these people the other non-holiday times of the year? The Jesus rock and roll prayer canopies where good suburban Christians prayed with homeless, lost souls, the insane, the morally bankrupt. Sidewalk observing this crowded mix of saviors and sinners, me somehow in between, looking at the other people under the influence of prayer, chairs facing each other, leaning forward, heads bowed, Savior hands wrapped around those being prayed upon to bring their souls into the fold of the white man's Jesus. I thought about the original Thanksgiving, how Indians saved the pilgrims from starving. The Indians had the land and the whites had the religion. Now it's the other way around. I should have felt jilted by all these goings on, but I didn't. Tears welled up in my eyes. I knew no matter what, religion started with good intentions. Prayer will always be stronger than a pile of rocks jutting out of the San Francisco Bay. Part 2. Before the Tenderloin prayer circus and shelter turkey meal, I spent sunrise on Alcatraz with a few thousand mostly whites and perhaps a couple hundred or so Indians. The old Aimsters, now elders, gave speeches on the occupation. But it was the Aztec dancers, their sunrise ceremony, that relaxed me the most. Dawn peacock feathers, drumming, conch shells blaring, rhythmic rattles, and the foot kick rhythmic twirls. Boats ferry everyone back to Pier 31, mid-morning, so all can get it on with their holiday festivities, with family, friends, loved ones, but not me. I bring back that pile of rocks that make up that island, carry them in my heart. Part 3. In a month, it will be Christmas. There will be no island for me to take over or give back. Only another free meal with all the trimmings of not having to feel alone in a place that is no longer my homeland, while America's belly is full, its conscience clear. And I thought I'd share another piece from the anthology. It's part of the prelude. It's Ishi's hiding place. Yahi tribal land, a long way from the streets of San Francisco. No use to go back. Only the spirits inhabit the land. What was your name, Ishi? Your people's custom forbade you to say it, so you were called man in Yahi. So anthropologists and newspapers knew what to call you. One of the few of your tribe who survived the Three Knolls massacre. How fitting 40-some years later, in 1911, you appeared near Oroville, California. You willingly emerged to a group of butchers at a nearby slaughterhouse corral. What was your name, Ishi? Touted the last wild Indian. Carted off to the University of California in Berkeley, nursed back to health to be studied under house arrest of the city in the new civilization. Employed as a janitor in the San Francisco Museum of Anthropology. In 1916, dying of tuberculosis, a death mask was prepared in your closing breaths to be photographed and displayed. While your brain shipped to the Smithsonian, the rest of you cremated to a cemetery near San Francisco. What was your name, Ishi? It was for you to keep alone, your only hiding place, to keep us with a great mystery. But one thing was for certain. After your final breath, no Indian could ever go back. So I want to be conscious of time, and I will pass it back to Lucille, and I thank you all. Oh, you're on mute, Lucille.
Okay, thank you, Kurt. Thank you both for speaking and reading those great poems, and thank you for reminding me to unmute. Before reading my own poems, I'm going to read 2 poems from the anthology by Sena Hayatawan. Sena was originally supposed to read with us tonight, but she unfortunately has needed to have surgery on one of her vocal cords, and she couldn't make it. Sena was born in San Francisco, but she is an enrolled member of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma. Her poems have been published in journals, magazines, and anthologies, and have won poetry prizes since the 1980s. She received her MA, MFA in creative writing from San Francisco State University. So I will read now 2 poems by Sena. The first one is called Baby Girl Song, and these are both in the anthology. You are my child of laughter. For you, the moon will change its face. For you, the rainbow will rise full circle. You are my child of hope. For you, the path will bend its destination. For you, the earth will forsake dry seasons. You are my child of freedom. For you, the eagle will share its wings. For you, the wind will travel day and night. You are my child of beauty. For you, the bird will give up its song. For you, the snow will fall with flowers. And the second poem by Senna that I will read is called A Failed Poem by the Light of the Moon. Sam drank whiskey. We smoked enough weed, unleashed coughing fits, crackling night. Tonight was warm enough to sit on the porch, watching ponies shadow the moonlight. She told me, maybe horses are wishes. Whiskey tastes better. And now I will read 3 poems of my own. The first one is one of my poems from the anthology. It's called At Lake Tahoe. Granite mountains, dense with white firs, lodgepole pines, and ponderosas, rise abruptly from the lake's blue bowl, so deep its waters could cover all of California and Nevada. The Washos, who lived here 10,000 summers, named it Lake in the Sky because it reflected clouds, sunset, and stars. They caught Lahontan trout in the lake, mountain whitefish in icy streams. On the other side of the continent, my Wampanoag ancestors were gathering cranberries, covering their summer homes with cattail mats, baking clams, drying corn, and fishing for salmon off Cape Cod. The Washos used only fallen trees for homes they would dismantle before leaving Lake in the Sky each winter. In fall, they gathered pinyon pine nuts to eat until spring. This was before white people came and cut down the pinyon pines to build their houses, dynamited the mountains in search of silver and gold, and claimed the fish. Now, a paddle boat with 3 decks takes tourists on cruises of Lake Tahoe. Yet in summer, Washos still do the pine nut dance, and Wampanoags do the grass dance to keep the world in balance and remind us that the earth is living. Every rock is sacred, and every tree and salmon has a soul. And next, I'd like to read a poem called Justice. This is dedicated to Leonard Peltier, whom Kurt mentioned. Peltier was an activist in the American Indian movement in the early 1970s, and he has been in prison since 1976 for supposedly killing 2 FBI agents on the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota. But I think all the indications are that he is not guilty. He was unfairly targeted for this. The government wanted somebody to pay for this, for the deaths of these 2 agents. And it turned out that Leonard Peltier became the person to pay for it, whether he did it or not. So this is called Justice. At this moment, someone who didn't murder his wife. Oh, there's one more thing before I read this poem I want to say. There are 2 phrases in it in the Wampanoag. One is Kutapudish Katanit, that's thank you, great spirit. And the other is Pish Kunash, and that's I'll see you in the future. So justice. At this moment, someone who didn't murder his wife crosses a prison yard while fat geese pass overhead. Someone who didn't rape anyone watches cockroaches dart on the floor of his cell while his roommate snores. Kutapudish Katanit, it isn't me. Someone who didn't know her boyfriend was a dealer plans her appeal as whales breach and the ozone hole grows. Someone who didn't abuse a child meets with her tired attorney, wondering if the bees will survive until she's released. Pish Kunash, when you are free. Someone who didn't embezzle $2 million listens to rain as he waits for his children on visiting day. Someone who didn't murder 2 FBI agents hopes for parole while hives collapse, geese land in Florida, and cockroaches mate. And the last poem of my own that I will read is a longish poem. It's called Names of the States, and it tells the history of the names of 31 of the 50 United States. And this poem was nominated for a pushcart prize last year by the Yellow Medicine Review. So, names of the states. Alabama, for the Alabama tribe, forced from Alabama to Texas when white people claimed their land in 1805. Alaska, for the Aleut word Alyeska, meaning mainland, the place toward which the sea flows. Arizona, the word for small spring in the Owadam language of a Southwest desert people who couldn't vote until 1948. Arkansas, another name for the Quapaws, the downstream people who were removed to Oklahoma from their ancestral lands. Connecticut, from the Algonquian word for Long River Place. Delaware, from Baron de la Warr, Virginia's first governor, whose name rechristened the local Lenni Lenape, the first tribe to sign a treaty with the US. Hawaii, for Hawaii Loa, discoverer of the islands in Polynesian myth. Idaho, maybe Shoshone, for the sun comes down the mountain, or the Apache word for the Comanches who drove them from the southern plains. Illinois, a French transliteration of Illinois, the Ojibwe word for the Anoka, whose 13 tribes were reduced to 5 by European disease. Indiana, land of the Indians, the Delaware, Piankashaw, Kickapoo, Wea, Shawnee, Miami, and Potawatomi, who were mostly removed by 1846. Iowa, from the Dakota name for the Iowa tribe, meaning sleepy ones. Kansas, the Dakota word for the South Wind people, whose last fluent speaker of the Kansa language died in 1983. Kentucky, derived from the Iroquoian word for on the meadow. Massachusetts, people of the Great Hills, that is the Blue Hills south of Boston Harbor, who were decimated by smallpox in 1633. Michigan, from Mishigamaa, great water in the language of the Ojibwe, who, like so many others, didn't understand the treaties ceding their land. Minnesota, from Minnesota, the name the Dakotas gave the Minnesota River, whose clear blue water reflected clouds. Mississippi, from Mississippi, Ojibwe for the Great River, along which more than 20 tribes lived and fished. Missouri, for the Missouria tribe that lived on the Missouri River, a Siouan people whose name means town of the big canoes. Nebraska, from Nebraska, the Omaha word for broad water, a description of the Platte River by which the tribe lived. New Mexico, named for the Mexicas, a Nahuatl-speaking people who ruled the Aztec Empire until the Spanish conquered them in 1519. North and South Dakota, named for a Sioux tribe whose men were sentenced in 1862 to the largest mass execution in US history, though Dakota means friend. Ohio, from Ohio, continuously giving river in the language of the Senecas, whose land was flooded in 1965 following construction of Kanzua Dam. Oklahoma, from Oklahoma, Choctaw for red people, a name proposed by the chief of the Choctaw Nation during treaty negotiations in 1866. Oregon, maybe from Warrigan, an Algonquian word for beautiful river, but so many native words and languages have been lost that it's hard to say. Tennessee, for the Cherokee town Tanasi, a village on the Little Tennessee River until the Cherokees were marched to Oklahoma along the Trail of Tears. Texas, meaning friends or allies in the language of the Caddos, who were removed to Oklahoma in 1859. Utah, from Utahi, an Apache word meaning people of the mountains. Wisconsin, from Mesconsing, the name for the Wisconsin River in the Miami language, river running through a red place. Wyoming, a contraction of Mechiwiamiing, a Delaware word first used for a valley in Pennsylvania, meaning at the Big Plains. And yes, every part of this land is Indian country, from forest to desert, mountain to prairie, Manhattan to Yosemite, Tallahassee to Seattle, all the fields, rivers, hills, and canyons between the two shining seas. And this poem isn't in the anthology, but it's in my new book of poems, Birds of San Pancho and Other Poems of Place, which just came out from Blue Light Press. So our next reader, I'd like to welcome Linda Noel. Linda is of Koyunkawi descent. Another name for her tribe is Concow, a name bestowed by settlers who couldn't pronounce Koyunkawi or perhaps didn't want to try. She grew up in Mendocino County and currently resides in Ukiah, California, where she is Poet Laureate Emerita. So welcome, Linda.
Thank you, Lucille. I'm going to start with a poem from the anthology that I changed the title to. It was called Ancestral Strength, and I changed it to Winter Within, but I have since changed it back to Ancestral Strength. But I will go with Winter Within. Winter glimmers before me, lonely, shoulder down, hip angled. I am part my grandpa who waited for first snowfall before leaving Willow Creek. Part my mother who helped push her father's car from snow-covered red dirt ditches. Part my grandma living snowbound in pine country, and part my father who walked the miles to town sledding food back to grandma's cabin. Winter draws its shawl about us. Salmon's fall run has faded, acorns have dropped, and mushrooms have found light. I look into winter and know that no frost can freeze the spirit. No 1,000 winters of ice could extinguish the flaming heart of my people. And my people come from Gold Rush country, so I'm always amazed that we're still here. I am going to read, as Lucille had said, kind of a longish poem, if you will. So I invite you along with me. And it's called We Stand. On the sound of flapping clipper ships, we stand. In the first lapping of the building wave, we stand. In the destructive print of the first step taken by foreign feet, we stand. In the reverberating motion of Ponce de Leon, Cortez, and De Soto, we stand. In the determination of Coronado's conquistadors, we stand. From beneath the pressure of religious leaders, we stand. With the corn, beans, squash, and meat brought to Plymouth, we stand. With the introduction of smallpox, we stand. In a circle around the sharpened crown, we stand. On the ship carrying us to be traded for better slaves, we stand. In the fury of King Philip's war, we stand. In the aftermath of the native massacre called Thanksgiving, we stand. In the bounty placed on a scalp, we stand. In the stiff fold of the Jesuits' robe, we stand. Within the cold walls of the War Department, we stand. On the El Camino Real and the grass at the Presidio, we stand. In defiance of Thomas Jefferson to exterminate us, we stand. In the shadow of St. Clair's defeat, we stand. On the foundation of the agency and outside the fort walls, we stand. On either sides of the St. Lawrence, Ohio, and Mississippi, we stand. In the rattling name of Gatlin, we stand. On the shores of Huron, Superior, Erie, Ontario, and Michigan, we stand. On the spine of the Great Divide, we stand. On the broken words of 500 treaties, we stand. On the crooked shoulders of Shivington, Sherman, and Jackson, we stand. With Crazy Horse, Red Cloud, and Pontiac, we stand. With the wind of Wounded Knee, we stand. With the enduring Bison, we stand. Through the stampede of the Sooners, we stand. On the sharp edge of Obsidian, we stand. In the red stain of Sand Creek, we stand. With Captain Jack, Geronimo, and Chief Joseph, we stand. In the echoing claim of the Mission Bell, we stand. In the ink of every congressional act, we stand. On the flecks of the vanishing bald eagle, we stand. Within the shine of the Black Hills, we stand. At the edge of the Rio Grande, Colorado, Feather, and Yuba, we stand. In the tainted glimmer of the gold rush, we stand. In the intention of federal intervention on behalf of Indians, we stand. Within the breath of every commissioner on Indian affairs, we stand. Within and without the walls of the Interior Department, we stand. Beyond the muddy trail of tears and Nome Cult, we stand. In the blood frozen in historical snow, we stand. On the top of the Statue of Liberty and Mount Rushmore, we stand. In the silhouette of the ghost dance, we stand. On the warped words of every executive order, we stand. On the Indian Removal Act and Dawes Act, we stand. In the hands of Anna May, we stand. On the rocky cliffs of Alcatraz, we stand. Within the gills of Salmon's struggle, we stand. On the tilted steps of the Bureau of Indian Affairs, we stand. On either side of the Sierra, we stand. On the pavement of Hoover and Orville Dam, we stand. Within the memory of Richard Oakes and John Trudell, we stand. Around the fire of ancient flames, we stand. With redwood, cedar, oak, and sequoia, we stand. At the edge of the Atlantic and Pacific, we stand. On the skyline of Manhattan, we stand. At the base of the Sundance Tree, we stand. Within the circled walls of the Roundhouse, we stand. In the texture of acorn mush, we stand. In the stitch of willow, maple, and redbud, we stand. In the never ratified treaties of California, we stand. With every deliberate intention to be rid of us, we stand. In the rippling sound of cry song, we stand. Next to the reorganization, relocation, and self-determined acts, we stand. With mule hoof tracks on our backs, we stand. With every Native woman and man imprisoned, we stand. With each breath taken in the sweat lodge, we stand. With prayers of thanks and hopes, we stand. With cedar and sage smoke, we stand. Beneath sky, sun, moon, and glimmering star wings, we stand. Within the knowledge of goodness, we stand. With the blessings of each day, we stand. For the name of humanity, we stand. With rain, snow, lightning, and thunder, we stand. And with our relatives at Standing Rock, we stand. Thanks for going along on that ride. I'm just going to finish with another poem that I think is appropriate for the times. And it's called Mountain Song, but it certainly could be a river song, a prairie song, an ocean song, a valley song. Mountain Song. Blessed mountain, you are my home. Sacred homeland, you are my heart. Blessed heart, you are my truth. Sacred truth, you are the way. Blessed way, you are a circle. Sacred circle, you are a basket. Blessed basket, you weave my life. Sacred life, you are a gift. Thank you.
I always forget to unmute myself, but thank you, Linda. That was terrific. Next, we have Nanette Deetz. Nanette is Dakota and Lakota. She's originally from Crow Creek, South Dakota, And she's a Cherokee descendant from the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma on her mother's side. On her father's side, she's German American. She holds a BA and MA from UCLA in theater arts and dance, and a second MA in counseling psychology. Her poetry has been published widely. She's the co-coordinator of the Alameda Island Poets. And in 2019, the 17th Annual Berkeley Poetry Festival honored Nanette with its Lifetime Achievement Award for poetry and activism. Nanette is also a journalist for Indian Country Today and Native News Online. Welcome, Nanette.
Thank you, Lucy. I just want to say, Tomi Takuye, Shante Wastea Nape Yusapele. I just said hello, my relatives. My name is Nanette, and I welcome you. I say hello with a good heart. I'm very, very proud and honored to be a part of Red Indian Road West. I'll hold it up one more time. And very honored to be included in this particular anthology with so many beautiful, wonderful Native poets. Lucy had asked me to read something having to do with Alcatraz, since that's what we're honoring now, the 50th anniversary. And I wrote a poem way back in 1994, I believe, for a powwow that we actually held on Alcatraz at the time. It was, again, kind of a celebration of, I think, the 20th, either the 20th or the 25th anniversary. Somebody who's good at math can figure it out. But it was really fun. And I wrote this particular poem for the next generation of young people coming up. And it's called Night Eagle. And I should explain from the beginning that in the Cherokee tradition, we consider the owl, we call the owl a night eagle because of their eyesight at night and their incredible predatory abilities. We don't, like other tribes, consider the owl a messenger of, particularly of death. I know several Cherokee people who have owl as a last name. We consider the owl more, I guess, more just of a predatory, very intelligent bird. And so we give lots of respect. So I entitled this poem, Night Eagle. The night eagle landed softly last night, eyes a red amber glow among the headlights on the 880. We headed north toward the Bay Bridge and Alcatraz. The wind from her wings whispered into my ears, Creator, come to earth that night in owl's form to tell me about you. Already knew. I had been waiting, watching, praying, hoping to find warriors here in the land of the crazy time of the fast flying wheel, taking us all too far away from our mother, Makaina, grandmother Earth. Suddenly I saw an eagle dancer, your spirit brother, spirit sister. I saw you and I recognized you. I recognized you. Your strong heart and soft eyes told me you too travel through dreams. We all breathe the same ether of the other worlds, dream dancers, ghost dancers in this middle land of pain and tears. Wakantanka, Creator, send us a dream so we can all dance together. All dance together. Dance together. That's my poem for Alcatraz. I'll read maybe one other short poem that is also in the anthology. And this one I actually wrote in English because I wanted our language teacher in Cherokee or Chalagi to use it as a teaching tool, which he did do. And I'm not good enough at the language to read it in that language. I'll have to do it in English. It's called Crow Dance. Black crow sits on a pine tree, white clouds against an azure sky. North wind whispers her secrets as crow listens from the top of the earth. We watch each other from different galaxies, circles intersecting circles, as the waters of the San Francisco Bay flow around us. Crow begins his dance as squirrel appears from behind the pine tree. Butterfly and dragonfly watch as our galaxies intersect for one moment under a pine tree by the bay, dancing from the top of the earth. And that is Crow Dance. I'd like to read another poem that I kind of wrote as a well, I'll save that for the end. It's kind of a prayer for a friend, but when I went to Standing Rock, I went back there as a journalist to report on primarily the school that everybody had set up for the kids. But for me, it was a homecoming. I had not ever been back to Crow Creek. I'd been to Cheyenne River, I'd been to Pine Ridge, but somehow I never made it all the way to Crow Creek, which is about 300 miles away from those other places. But what was wonderful is I got to find the camp and meet the tribal chairman and many different people, and it ends up, many of them were related to people I knew out here who were Lakota, because everyone at Crow Creek is pretty much Dakota, but everybody intermarried at one point. So there's a lot of, people that I got to meet, and it was a wonderful homecoming on one level. So I wrote this poem when I got back. It's called We Are Our Ancestors' Wildest Dream. Miniwichoni, water is life. Sacred water used as a weapon. They turned their dogs on us, chemical weapons, bullets once again. Still like a river, we flowed until we gathered together at Standing Rock. Coming home through generations of displacement, loss of family, land, language, traditions. So many lost, yet we heard the song and followed the drum by bus, by car, by plane. Some walked, some even ran. We are our ancestors' wildest dreams. Campfires burned, coyotes sang as we touched the stars. Morning sun rises and Inipi changes from pink to mauve, purple, then yellow, until furious light shines through smoke from many hearts. Horses roam freely, buffalo visit once again, and children laugh. We are our ancestors' wildest dreams. That's my poem for Standing Rock. I have another poem that I wrote many years ago that I used again as a way to learn and practice language. It's very difficult to try to remember and hold on, and many times we have to go back and relearn language, which I kind of devoted several years to doing. And I had some very good teachers, so it was a lot of fun. And I wrote this poem first in English and then had it translated into Lakota so that I could practice the language primarily. It was a wonderful experiment for me and an experience to try to do that. So I'll just read it in English. It's about my grandfather. It's called In Memory of Kenneth James Bradley, or Iron Eagle, which is our family name, who took his spirit walk March 24, 1976. Wo Okiksuye, Kenneth James Bradley, Iron Eagle, Wanagi Omani Kage, March 24, 1976. I live on an island now, Turtle Island, surrounded by the sound of water. Songbirds, red-tail hawk, blue heron, egret, sandpipers, blue jay, and crow. Here is where I deny urban reality, this new world. My relatives taught me early the trick to Indian survival, how to make the square a circle, how to make concrete cars, and pain disappear. They taught us how to look at our land and see it as it was 528 years ago. Iron Eagle taught us to remember the season when choke cherries ripen, to remember the stars and the star people, to remember the gift of knowledge passed through stories and memories, to remember to sing and dance, sing and dance, sing and dance. Mixed race woman, mixed race man, caught in the gauze between two worlds, our mind and senses the only means of escape. But scar tissue lays thick and deep. Too many broken promises, broken treaties, broken hearts, loved ones taken away or leaving us behind, has made our eyes weak, but our hearts sharp and clear. Our hearts sharp and clear. Deer, wolf, bear, buffalo. That's the poem from my grandfather. And I'm thinking of, I wrote a poem for a friend of, actually my companion who just passed last year from a massive heart attack. And his, he loved cars. I call him my car guy. And his real baby lover was a 57 Chevy that he had completely renovated so it looked turquoise and white, looked like the original 57 Chevy. So I call this the Chevy Samba in his memory. His lover is a turquoise and white, perfectly renovated, tricked out 57 Chevy. Sharp, cool, suave. He checks the rearview mirror as the large dice sway to the rhythm of a hula dancing doll placed permanently on the back window ledge. Heavy, sparkling metal and white-walled tires samba down a road that goes nowhere, fast. Drag racing, he tries to outrun the moon. On a dark street lit only by stars, the wheel slips from his fingers. For an instant, he hovers between life and death. No time left to choose. And that was for Charlie in his memory. I wrote one poem for the pandemic. I call it Love and Death during a time of pandemic. And it doesn't have a title other than that, and it's not quite completed, but I will arise and go now and try to be free from worries about disease, survival, housing, and food.
Oh, man.
Rise and go now to a place where fireflies glow, where crickets sing their night lullabies, where wildflowers bloom along riverbanks, swollen with willows, tule, and cottonwood trees, and watch lizards as they bask in the sun and jump from rock to rock. I will arise and go now to swim in pools fed by waterfalls. I will dive with fish, talk with dragonflies as they dart over water's edge. I will arise and go now to find a new home, a place where there is no disease, only peace, joy, and love, where I can build my life as if it were a piece of art or a poem. And I'll end with a little prayer that I wrote for a friend that seems very apropos to this particular time that we find ourselves in history, our kind of shared history. I can find it. It's a poem prayer. Sacred Mother, Maka'ina, grandmother, breath of all life, source of light. You are the center that holds the circle, transformer of material, flow of life, song of my relatives, path of our ancestors, seen and felt everywhere. Guide us toward wisdom, knowledge, compassion. to the beauty in all life. And I'll end with that little poem prayer. Thank you, Lucy, for inviting me to read. It was wonderful to be in the anthology.
And thank you too, Nanette. That was really lovely, beautiful.
Thank you.
Now, our next poet will be Stephen Meadows. Steve is a Californian of Pioneer and Ohlone descent. He earned degrees from UC Santa Cruz and San Francisco State University, and his poems have appeared in anthologies and journals nationwide, and one of them graces a bronze plaque in San Francisco. He has devoted much of his life to poetry in an attempt to honor his ancestors and the beauty of the natural world. He's a veteran of public radio, where he has interviewed scores of musicians and visionaries from the British Isles to North America. Steve now resides with his family in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada, and his poetry collection, Releasing the Days, was published by Heyday.
All right, thank you very much. I appreciate all that you said about me, and I certainly appreciate all that you do for Native American poetry all over the place. I'm very pleased to be here and very honored. I'm going to read one longish poem called In the Water Over Stones for Isabel Meadows. Your voice, Isabel, is a quail's voice as the sun's song ticks in the brush. It is the hawk's voice and the heart's heat of the rabbit in the parched summer grass. Nearby in the river, in the water over stones, it is a willow voice. It is a crayfish voice in the hollows, in the darkening places. At first light, it is the wind's voice, the mouth of the river Tule voice, the voice of 100 breezes. The sun marks out the red madrone, and in the canyons, it is a redwood voice, a sycamore voice, sweet-scented. In the spring, it is the lupin voice, a blue, white, and purple coverlet voice, all over the hills and the meadows. On the river banks, as the set fires burn and the steelhead run, it is the hunter's voice, flinging the gleamers silver on the sand. Though the houses of rich men now cover these hills, it is your spirit voice, your evening voice, your voice of the western waters. The stars hang out over the point of wolves. On the edge of the world, the sea lions call. The otters break open abalone. It is the voice of the land. It is the voice of bright shells. It is the voice of the valley and the mountain, Isabel. It is the voice of the people, too. It is the weaver's voice. It is the young girl's voice, the gatherers and the singers and the farmer's voice, the wives and the children's and the old woman's voice. It is the Indian voice and the whalerman's voice and the voice of the servant escaping. It is the voice of your face across the years, Isabel, in my grandfather's face, in my father's face, and in my face as well. It is the voice of the one on the edges, Isabel. It is the voice of those ones with no voices. Hawk and rabbit, quail and brush, water and willow and crayfish and stone, wind in the canyons, daylight through limbs, the lupin, the steelhead, the cook fire's call, beans and tortillas, your memories, Isabel, talking to us all. Thank you all very much. It's an honor to be with you.
Thank you too, Steve. I love that poem. That is just a terrific, beautiful poem. Everybody should know. It is dedicated to Isabel Meadows. That's Steve Meadows' great aunt. And she was the last fluent speaker of the Rumsen Ohlone language. And she spent the last 5 years of her life at the Smithsonian recording the Ohlone language and myths and oral history. And it's because of her that it's been possible for the Ohlones to have a language recovery program today. So our last reader will be Jewelle Gomez. Jewelle is Iowa, Wampanoag, and Cape Verdean. She was born and raised in Boston during the fertile times of the civil rights, anti-war, American Indian, and lesbian feminist movements. She's the author of 7 books, including the cult classic vampire novel, The Gilda Stories, which had an expanded 25th anniversary edition in 2016. Her play about James Baldwin premiered in 2011, and her play about singer-composer Alberta Hunter premiered in 2015. Her new novel about the reunion of 1960s Black student activists is looking for a home. Welcome, Jewelle.
Thank you. Thanks, Lucille. It's an honor to be reading with everyone here this evening. It's been really wonderful, and I can't wait to go back and look at the video online. So this first piece I'm still working on. In March of 2020, the man formerly known as the President of the United States revoked the reservation status of the Mashpee Wampanoag. So this poem is called Fact Checking. Are we not still fighting for the land of the free, home of the braves who tracked through marsh grasses, carrying their ancestors with them into battle? Did not Mashpee fires warm us in our wigwams and tenements, lighting the way through our grandmother's stories, and still the invaders came? We do not fault them for their color, their ignorance and barbarity, or their empty spirit, which must have drained away in their ocean crossing. History is prologue, we know, yet can it also be the flint to ignite a new fire to catch and burn down lies? If I recall correctly, sovereignty is only a series of letters tumbled together until the land is in our hands, until we remember our mother, until pieces of paper are respected, until the votes are counted. Just checking. This is a part of a longer poem called The Naming, and it's dedicated to Minewa, the woman who did the naming ceremony for myself and for my mother. We gathered in New England, we gathered in a New England yard, many colors and ages, to find my name, imagining the land 400 years ago before synthetic fibers and false fires. At our center was a tree which hadn't borne leaves in many years, yet it stood firm. Its arms glistened with possibility. There, she decided, deep cutting channels yielding abalone, sand dollars, and starfish. Still water, for moving slow through stone, leaving my trace embedded in rock, in sand, and on the pages of lives. Still water, who touches all shores, past and present, in my journey to the ocean, even as I seem unmoving. Lifting my name from the air that whistled through bare branches, she lay it across my shoulders, where it now sits, as if it were always my own. Kana Tugamuk, still water. This poem is called More Than One. I was the quiet one, except in school, where I made the students laugh and the teachers cry. Why was I so smart, they asked. So smart ass, they meant. To them, I squandered my talents for waitressing or typing by noticing history. I was the abandoned one, too dark for my mother, too fat to work in television, too light for the Black movement, too kinky-haired for the tribe. I was the mixed one who spoke of only a single ingredient, fitting myself to the times, Ugawa, Black power, leaving the rest for TV Westerns. I was the queer femme one with no discernible type except butch, black, white, brown, in no particular order. Then I was given a name and learned I was not a one, but many, carrying my generations wrapped like a precious blanket around me, woven from Iowa, Wampanoag, and Cape Verde threads, wearing my wampum, not trading it, still making some laugh, some cry. And the final poem is in the anthology. Thank you again, Lucille, for including me. It was also on the included in the exhibit. There was a permanent exhibit on Alcatraz of Native American arts. So this is called Alcatraz Reunion, and it's for my mother, Dolores Has No Horses, LeClaire. Mother is a tourist visiting me as I did her when I was a child being raised elsewhere, always worried she'd forget me. Now we pretend she taught me how to read or ride a bicycle, that she waited by the door for me to arrive after school, or watched me dress for my first dance. We act as if we shared secrets when I was a teen, anxious then the world would see me for who I am, a child separate from a mother. Boarding the ferry, we are not exactly strangers, nor are we a fragrant recollection of worlds lived side by side, giving shape to each other. We are two aging women buying memories from the souvenir stand, damp by the gangway, taking snapshots that will remind us how alike we are. It's a cold ride and perverse to be among those eager to peer through prison bars and glimpse long past misery, the ghost of anger pacing and fear caged so close to city lights. Only when we land does a spark of Wampanoag and Iowa fill her eyes, as it did with her mother, as it does with me. Prairie dust and Atlantic seagrasses embrace the precipitous Pacific shoreline, harsh and familiar, mapping the beginnings. Others stroll past us up the path toward prison lore. We go deep beneath the thick crumbling walls where rock beats rock, sacred space, not prison. We cross the distance between us on that hard stolen place, Iowa and Wampanoag, meeting Ohlone, Pomo, Yurok, Hupa, Shasta, Washoe, as well as Hopi, Modoc, Sioux, Paiute, Cherokee, and Inuit, Choctaw, a nation of endless nations, a soft shuffle of their feet on stone in a dance meant to bind all together. Sitting on a bench on Alcatraz, finally we hold hands like we might have done when I was a child, clinging tight as if the pressure of our palms will allow us to read each other's past. Thank you.
Thank you, Jewelle. That was a I think, a perfect poem to conclude our reading with. And now, I think you can, anybody who has a question or a comment about the reading, I think you can unmute yourself now. And certainly all of the readers should unmute yourself so that you can answer people's questions. And you could, I think you can just unmute yourself and ask a question, or you could put it into the chat.
I just want to say how wonderful this was. I thought all the poems were very touching, and the expression visually, I could see most of what you were saying in your poem, and it was so heartfelt, and I'm so glad I got the opportunity to experience this. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you for being here.
I unmuted everyone so we could all give you a big round of applause as well. How about that now?
Hey.
And there was lots of love from the YouTube crowd. So the love is out there on that side as well. Lots of thanks and lots of great people joining us in YouTube.
Oh, nice.
Someone had put in the chat a question about hearing poems in native languages. I don't know if people have information on where they might go.
I have one. I have one that's translated.
But she wanted to hear the language. So, I mean, I know that there, back east, the Wampanoag Language Reclamation Project is probably doing some things like that. I'm not sure, but I don't know if other people had information or sources.
I can hook you up.
Jennifer Forster is here. Jennifer, can you hear me? If you can, because there's Jennifer Forster, whose name I see on the screen, is one of the editors of a new anthology called When the Light of the World Was Subdued, Our Songs Came Through. It's an anthology of it's the Norton Anthology of Native Nations Poetry. And it was edited, but the main editor is Joy Harjo, our poet laureate. And there are two other associate editors, Jennifer Forster and Leanne Howe. And so I was hoping maybe Jennifer would know where to hear poems in the native languages. There are poems. There are some poems in native languages in that anthology, but when you read it on the page, that isn't the same as hearing it. And honestly, when I read native poems in native languages on the page, I kind of just skim it and go to the English translation, because I don't even know how I should be hearing it if I don't know the language. So what we really need is somebody who can speak it, or a recording, so that we can hear the poem spoken. So if anybody here knows of such recordings of poems in native languages that we can hear, please speak up and let us know.
Well, I translated a couple of mine. Many times when I write, I combine the languages together. I'll put some English, then I'll put some Lakota, then I'll put some English and maybe a little bit of Chalagi. So I have one poem that I had completely translated. The one that I read from my grandfather. We were taking a Lakota language class at the time, and William Underbaggage was our teacher, along with Janine Antoine, and he's a direct descendant of Sitting Bull, so he was very fluent. And Janine helped us also. So that class went on for about a full year, possibly a year, almost 2 years. And we all met together once a week. And it was really a good experience for all of us. I chose to write poetry.
And do you have a poem that you can read completely in the
I
event?
do, but I probably will. I might slaughter the language. I mean,
Do the best you can.
Kurt can jump in and correct me.
Try.
I'm very embarrassed. I'm sure I'll kind of somewhat, Kurt, you help me and tell me if I'm a little embarrassed. I'm probably going to really say stuff wrong, I'm sure.
I'm sorry, Nanette, I'm not fluent in Lakota.
I'm not, but my teacher actually wrote this. So I know the words are correct, but my pronunciation is probably really wrong. And for that, I apologize to any fluent speakers out there. I could read a little of it. I don't think he'd probably want to hear the whole thing. I don't think.
Why don't you read a little of it? And clearly none of us are going to complain about it.
Oh my goodness.
Right.
Anybody out there listening, please forgive me. Okay. I know I'm going to do it wrong. Okay, here we go. Wana Alameda he mataha. Wita akawa mini ona wanakun. Shinkala loan shitan sinte luta pehanska wakiyela nakangi. Otuwahe shlowawaye shinshni. Liwo oti techaki. Doshke kage mimi meyalaki. Toshke chunku insnala iyanke naha. Ayazampa ipag tagniye. Unki pazo liwitaki. Toshke o pawinge naha. Isa glogon. Ken unspe unkiapi. Kiksuyape. Tohan shunka kisape ki. Kiksuyape. Kape oyate ki. Kiksuyape. Toshke wa oyaka. Na ehata unspe unya. Kiksuyape wa olowa wachipe. I can end there. I don't think I should go any further.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyway,
Thank you so
I apologize, anybody who's a speaker. I'm sure
That was amazing.
That was
at
great.
least I got it done. You know, I feel very proud of myself for being able to, write it down anyway. So that's all I've got.
Well, that's good. And I mean, it's wonderful
That was wonderful.
that you can do
tried.
that. And it's wonderful that some of the native languages have survived. It's wonderful that there's a
hard.
Wampanoag language recovery program, and that
Yeah.
thanks to Steve Meadows' great aunt, there's an
Oh, yeah.
Ohlone language recovery program, because the
Oh.
US government tried for about 100 years to destroy, to stamp out native languages. They sent native children to boarding schools where they were forbidden to speak their native languages. They were beaten or shamed if they were heard speaking their native languages. Yet somehow we've made it through that, and we still have a lot of languages that we can learn and that our descendants can learn. And so clearly not everything has been lost.
Yeah, we try. We try.
Clearly.
Thanks, everyone.
So are there any more questions or comments?
I actually have a question. I had a question for everyone. Just in hearing all of this, I was loving the interplay between past and present and future. And I was wondering if the panelists could speak to their future for Native poets, like if they could imagine the future of Native poetry, what would it look like?
Wow.
Anybody is welcome to say. And I think it'll be a combination of native languages and English, because there is, a lot of tribes have language recovery programs, and children are learning the languages, and we want these native languages to survive. That's part of our culture, and it's important. Yet to communicate with the larger population in the US and the rest of the world, we also need to write poems in English. So I see the future as including poems in English, poems in the native languages, and poems that use both.
That would be lovely. I'd like to see that too. That would be wonderful.
So I would say that's a great question, Mason. And when I think of the future, I think of our youth, our Native youth. I think of the generations earlier than I am, and certainly all of us as contributors. You know, like I alluded to earlier in my introduction, is that, you know, I'd been doing this a long time, and I started out really in spoken word, and I had to really get out there and hustle. There was no media in a sense that there is social media and more outlets like this, like Zoom and things like that. You know, so times have changed, times have passed me by, and the technology is part of that future with youth. They're more savvy about online things. And I think that, you know, inspiring those youth to tell their story, what is unique to them, you know, now and in the future, how does that intertwine with the traditions and culture of our Native people and our tribes? So, you know, I leave it to them. I have a teenage daughter. She's an artist, and she's written poetry. I try to inspire her, but you know, the poems that she shared with me, I love them, and I think they come from a place of her being, and you know, hopefully influenced by her Lakota culture through me. So I look to the future of these younger generations to reinvent it, but my hope is that they carry part of that tradition and culture with them in some capacity. Doesn't always have to be that way. But anyway, that's my take on it. But that's a great question. Thank you.
I think there's something really fascinating about most people who were writing Native American poetry. It really strongly carries that oral tradition. So when you're listening, you're hearing them out loud in your head even. And I think that's in kind of a great intersection for younger people, for whom different kinds of music and spoken word are really powerful. And because most Native American poets are writing about radical social change, that is reclaiming heritage and land and language, we're at an intersection where this country is being called to address the things that have gone wrong for the past several hundred years. And I think Native American writing is right at that intersection where it can join with other groups who are writing social change into the air, really.
Yeah.
Anyone else with comments or questions?
Lucy, can you hear me?
Yes.
I just want to say it was just really nice evening, and that I really enjoyed seeing and hearing Stephen again and everyone else too. And if there's no further questions, I think I'm going to take my leave.
Okay, well, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Linda.
I think Linda has the.
Having me.
Good to see you.
And everybody else too. I'm sure I'll see you
Linda has
again.
the right. Thank you,
Thank you.
Linda. And I think that's a good segue for us all to take our leave. This event is available on YouTube. Like I said, I put lots of links into that chat box, and the main link is a document that has, I tried to keep up with all the books that were being talked about, so they should be in there. And yeah, so grab that link from the chat box, and I'll also be sending you a follow-up email if you haven't heard the last of us.
Okay, and I want to say one more thing.
Oh, yes, please.
You can copy the chat by clicking on the at the bottom of the chat on the lower right, there are 3 little dots. And if you click on that, there's an option to save the chat, and I just did that, so I'll have everybody's comments.
Oh, great. Okay.
And you can get then
Yeah.
all the links
All
to the
those
book
links.
and everything. It'll be downloaded on your computer.
Poets, thank you so much. I appreciate you all. San Francisco community, library community, I miss you. I love you. Have a wonderful evening.
And thank you to
Thank
Anissa,
you.
and thank you, Red Indian Road West contributors. Thank you, Kurt.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everybody.
audience.
Yeah,
Everyone.
did you-
It's been wonderful.
Wonderful.